that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Joy Haley.
Wonderful rendition of the national anthem as you get a live look high above the Glendoveer Golf Course in Portland as we set the stage for the first of our two championship races on this December Saturday. The girls' championship race to be followed by the boys as Tom Fuhrer, Galen Rupp join me. I'm Paul Swangard as we will also have for you the incorporation of our athletic course tracker that will be used in our graphics package to help show you where they are out on the course. This looks like how I get my golf game out at Glendoveer, as I'm always not following the regular routing of the said golf course. But as we look at the flyover here, guys, I mean, a really great use of our technology to be able to show it. But, it does reflect how many twists and turns they are, and they really use this golf course to the advantage of the course makers to make it a legitimate test.
Absolutely, yeah, and they're going to be doing a few laps, going over parts of the course several different times. So I think the first one, they're going to be getting a feel for it, feeling each other out, and then the second one, they're going to really be taking off for the finish line.
Question for you, Galen. There are 198 runners in this race. How important is it to get out front early?
I think it's really important. This is a different meet than a lot of these athletes are used to, and some of these teams have been so dominant during the year that it can be a little bit different and intimidating having so many great athletes that it is important to find your position and settle in really early, and that can set up the whole race for a team.
Well, the one thing we do know is there will be a new individual champion on the girls' side because Caitlin Toohey's too busy winning national titles as a collegiate at NC State. She won 3 consecutive races in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Her course record at Cary, North Carolina is no longer a record because it was just beaten by Irene Riggs by 20 seconds, considered one of the fastest cross-country 5Ks we've ever seen by a high school girl, and perhaps ready to emerge out of the shadows of that Caitlin Toohey era and be the next great cross-country champion.
And, Paul, we called that race, and Riggs had nobody within a country mile of her, over a minute 20. She could have broken 16 easily if she'd wanted to push it.
Well, as is tradition here before we get the race started, for all the viewers around the country, perhaps around the world, tuning in to watch this coverage here live, we give you a chance to see all of these talented cross-country runners at the end of a very long but very successful cross-country campaign with one title left for the taking here at Nike Cross Nationals under cool conditions, but it is dry. That's, as I look back at our weather, it's not necessarily the case. In fact, last couple of years, I think the last sunny day was 2016. Winds will be a factor here today. They'll have it at their back to start here as they'll open up on one of the front 9 fairways as we get set for racing.
Lucas Lovejoy looked so cold, and I can understand, because they're from Texas in the South, but they look freezing at the line.
Freezing but ready to run for a title. NXN 2022 is out on the course. And one of the great moments in the sport each and every time we see it here from high above the Glendoveer Golf Course, that wide 31-box opening stanza as they'll get themselves to the main part of the race here. And we'll keep an eye on the main favorites in the field. But again, this is a case where you can be the best in your region. Everyone's coming with their best today.
Absolutely. It's been a long season for a lot of these athletes, and people have had to race a lot, some more than others, and you can see that now you're going to get everybody's best here. You're not going to be pulling away. Maybe that'll be the case, I guess, but I guess we'll see.
Well, and your point about racing, Riggs has only had about 5 races under her belt. There's some athletes in the field that have run 12, 13 races already this year.
There's a lot of different ways to get to the top. I think sometimes it works better for certain athletes to have a few races. Others, you can race yourself into shape, and as long as you're learning and growing every race, that can be a great strategy to run your best at the end of the season as well.
Well, there is Irene Riggs, bib number 45, and where else but in the lead here early on in the opening kilometer of this 5K distance for the girls.
Paul, this is the most company she's ever had at this stage of a race all year long. She must be going, hey, who are all these people?
You can see the lead group, beginning to not thin out per se, but, the spread back to that main group. And I always love in the background the race within the race as the spectators try to get from different parts out of the course to be able to cheer on these folks as well. Our live stats will also give us a 1.3 kilometer split. We'll have 4 splits out on the course. The beauty of that, not only will we see where Riggs is relative to her rest of her chase pack, but also in real time we'll be adding up those team scores.
Kinetic has got a lot of runners in that pack just behind Irene Riggs. So Kinetic already putting their foot down and establishing kind of, hey, we are going to go for it here with our group. I count 5 of them that I see, Paul, from Kinetic in that front group.
And there's a look at the full team. Again, only the top 5 constitute your team score. As we've seen many years, may not be where your lead group runner is, but where that 4th or 5th runner finishes up. Here's one of the first climbs we'll see here, and already Riggs with the lead, but, second time we've seen her looking back already, early on in a race.
She does look a little bit strained, and I think the fact that she's already looking back a little bit, that wind, I think, is already having a factor, and she's trying to pull away, but it's a measured response from the pack. They're going to be trying to reel her in and not let her get too far of a gap early on.
So we look back to the group behind him. There's Helen Sachs, number 21, just came out of picture, the Midwest champion. But a lot of these, again, champions finding themselves in a little bit of a different position here in this championship race because they're, you're forcing these kids to now face championship level racing, and I think it's had really big dividends as we've seen distance running in America really improve its depth.
Absolutely. You've got to get used to competition. I mean, that at the heart of it is what our sport is all about, and it's great when you can run away from people, but the higher and higher of a level you get to, that's not always the case, and you've got to learn to beat people, be comfortable with other athletes around you, and really learn to win at the end of races.
Paul, I saw Andy Agard, the mountain biker, who was in the top 2 or 3 back there behind Irene Riggs. So she's in that mix right at the top. And also Isabel Conde de Frankenberg, the 800-meter runner, was in that top group for a bit. I was a little bit surprised to see her there.
So 4 minutes of racing complete over this 5,000-meter distance. Caitlin Toohey ran this course in 16:37.8 back in 2018 under rainier conditions. There is the first of our splits out on the course, 1.4 kilometers about, make it 1.3, and now we can start to see who that group is behind. We've got a lot of our main favorites there. Nekaniki, Conde de Frankenberg you mentioned, Mahalik, Agard, and there's a youngster, Sophia Kennedy, in the top 10.
That's exciting to see Bob Kennedy's daughter right in the mix there, I have to say. But as you said, it's a leaderboard that we are very, very familiar with. And Brooke Wilson was somebody I had mentioned in our open, Paul, as being a very consistent runner in the top 2 or 3 of every race she's in. And here she is making her presence felt today.
So Riggs lead at 1.3 kilometers, just a little over 3 seconds, and we'll see if it improves at all as we get that second split right there on that mat. That's 1 mile in, as we'll wait for Nekaniki to come through here, and I think it'll be about, almost 6 seconds.
Yeah, 5:10, and the gap's about 5.8 seconds.
She looks more comfortable now to me as well. I think that early nerves have kind of gone away. She's starting to settle in, and especially when you front run, once you see that gap a little bit start to grow, it can give you a little bit more confidence and force you to settle into the race a little bit more and run more comfortably.
So Galen, she's running about 15:50 pace on a freezing day. It's in the low 30s with winds up to 30-mile-per-hour gusts. I mean, this is absolutely downright impressive, isn't it?
And this is what great athletes do. It doesn't matter what the condition is. She's been peaking for this race all year, and she's ready to lay it all out on the line. So I'm thrilled to see her going for it here at the biggest race of the year.
Yeah, but look at those flags. As you can see, the crosswind that she's having to deal with. I know where my golf ball would be. It'd be out on the street at this point. But the conditions here are certainly set up for cross-country more than a golf outing, as we are at Glendoveer. It's a great shot from high above. You see the course tracker now taking us up into the this is the back 9 of one of the 2 golf 18-hole courses here at Glendoveer, and we'll make that turn around. They'll start to see some of the same part of the course on that loop towards the finish, but kind of out there in no man's land now.
Yeah, we talked about the wind earlier, but I think at this point, now that there's a gap, the wind could almost play more of a favor for Irene, because that chase group's got to deal with that wind as well. And if they don't get organized and nobody takes the initiative, they've got to be running into that wind and covering a huge gap. So the bigger that gap grows in front for Irene, you know, she could be in great shape heading forward.
Paul and Galen, Kinetic has got a 37-point lead. Of course, these are unofficial standings, but kind of what we expected. 37-point lead over that very deep Waxhaw team from the southeast region. I think it's looking good for Kinetic, honestly. This is a really large margin. They're a very experienced team with 4 of their 7 having run here 3 years ago.
Well, you talked about how aggressively they got out early, and I think that's a great strategy at the championship level meet. You know, now it's going to be a matter of settling in for them. That early part, they've gotten where they need to be. They need to not push so much in this middle part of the race and still have a strong finish to hold their lead.
One other interesting early development in this race is Samantha Humphreys and her sister Nicole Humphreys. She's the 207 800-meter runner. They're 11th and 12th here. That's a big surprise for me that these 2 Flower Mound runners are up that close to the front.
Well, you see them in the team score, I think top 5 at this point of the race. So that's where, you know, you don't know where your 3, 4, and 5 runners are, but if they can make it up, and maybe they can get some word to those, you know, those runners in real time, like you got some good placing up in front, try to move in that pack and see if you can move your way up maybe higher in the standings and get one of those top 3 positions for the podium. But right now it's Kinetic in control, trying to win its 2nd consecutive Nike Cross Nationals. So much of the success in cross country at NXN has come from the state of New York, with Manlius winning all those titles. Did not have a full squad enough to qualify this year for Nike Cross Nationals. Hope to see them in future editions, but right now Kinetic holding serve for New York as we near 9 minutes into the racing here, over the halfway mark and back to the start line here as they come through to work their way around, and will end up at the finish line in what will be a swift time if it holds here for Irene Riggs, as she is in total control out in front.
Yeah, she took a peek there, but hopefully she realized she's got a big lead, and right now, again, it's about settling in. This is the hardest part of the race, in my opinion, is when those beginning nerves are gone, you passed halfway, and now it's a grind. You know, you're starting to have those doubts creep in a little bit, and she's got to just stay composed here, which I'm sure she will. She's had tons of experience running and front running at that, so she's just got to hang on here, and she'll pull it off.
Galen, there does seem to be some distress on her face that I haven't seen in recent races. Do you see that or not?
A little bit. I thought she had some stress early on in the race. You know, I think the wind might have really been hitting her, and you know, it's there, but it's always a realization when you feel it in the beginning parts of the race, especially when you want to feel good, and that wind kind of knocked you back. But I think that her cadence looks really good, and she looks better to me almost than she did in the earlier part of the race.
And you also, in a race like this, you will have a bad patch, at least one.
Everybody has them. You know, we all have those doubts that come in. I think any runner knows that, and It's just a matter of trying to stay present. Again, she's been in this situation so many times this year, running from the front. She's a tough runner. I don't think that these conditions are going to phase her, but this is certainly a difficult time in the race where she's got to quiet those doubts.
Well, she comes through the 2-mile mark here, 5:10 in the first mile, comes through the second mile, 5:26.7. So slower on the second mile, still with that advantage, 10:36.7 on the clock as we still wait for the group behind her. McKinley, Mahalik, and Wilson, they come across the line second, third, and fourth. And let's check in on the course tracker as you see where they are, that pulsing NX logo as they work their way towards, and we'll have a chance to see for a moment the finish line, but make one final loop to get to home.
Couple points here, Paul. Neckaniki, Mahalik, and Wilson, very experienced. They're all seniors, as is Peyton Noy. Bob Kennedy's daughter is having the race of her life in 6th. Conde de Frankenberg, the 800-meter runner, in 7th. The mountain biker, Agard, in 8th. Callahan, the 30th ranked runner in the country, in 9th. The Humphreys sisters still there. And Tatum David, who's the top returner from 2019, in 12th.
And I like the race that Wilson's run here. You see her moving out to the outside right now, but she's been tucked in, and especially in a windy race, you don't need to put yourself out there unless you're willing to make a move, and it looks like she's making a move right now.
We have the leader on the screen, Irene Riggs. We'll get to the coverage of that chase pack here in a moment if we can, because that race for second, third, and fourth becoming rather interesting to follow. There you see it, as we mentioned, Neckaniki and Wilson now making that a little bit of a surge. Bib number 52 with bib number 91 back to the front of the pack, and once again has spent a lot of time looking behind. Does she realize now that that margin and edge for her is over 16 seconds?
She does look like there's a little more distress now, though, I got to say. Her knee lift isn't quite what it was a few minutes ago, and now she's going to have to really grind it out, and this is where toughness becomes a huge factor.
So updating those team scores in real time, it's gotten a little bit more interesting on that team race as the margin now just down to 16.
And I want to point out something on that margin. Niwot moving up very, very well, and they have the benefit of having trained at altitude, come down to sea level, and this wind is nothing for them. So I'm a little surprised it's narrowed that much. It's going to be very interesting to see how this last mile goes.
Well, and we keep talking about Kennedys and Ritzenheims as though we're broadcasting from another century, as we got a lot of names that are familiar to folks who have followed the sport for so long, and it's great to see a new generation of talent connected to those names out on these courses. Irene Riggs has just gone through 4K now in 13:15.5. With that wind now, looks like more in her face at this moment, but been dealing with that throughout the race course. And we'll get Wilson, Neckaniki, and Mahalik across the line as they are now another second or so behind Riggs, the margin up to 17.5 seconds.
And we're looking really at like a 16:30 now finish, 16:30, 16:35. Neckaniki, remember, has Wayzata, excuse me, their points are going to be very important. So any place she can get amongst that 3 to get Wayzata a couple extra points is going to be very, very important so that they can possibly get on the podium.
And that always gives you a little extra motivation when you know you've got your team counting on you, and any little bit helps. So especially when you're up front and your team's counting on that low stick, that's an extra motivator to get to the finish line and give you that little extra bit of juice at the end when you're competing for spots.
We'll have one more quick split on the screen at 4.4K in the 600 meters to the finish for Irene Riggs. The chase group of 3 beginning to decompress a little bit now as the race for second, third, and fourth continues to battle.
Decompress is a good word here. There's a lot of separation now developing between those 3. And whether this is like the definitive move by Wilson or not, I don't know.
I really like the race she's run. I think she's put herself in a great position to have success. Again, she sat back in the early part, really protected herself from the wind, allowed herself to save a lot of energy, and now in the later stages here, you can see it's really paying off.
And that's Neckaniki in the purple there behind her, and then Mahalik, who's got the best leg speed of all three of them, in the third position of those three.
Well, closing in on the final moments of this girls' championship race, Irene Riggs, after that dominating performance in Cary, North Carolina last weekend, a win by more than 1 minute and 20 seconds. She has not been challenged in a very limited schedule of racing, we should note, this fall, but she makes these final climbs towards the finish, and she is now in splendid isolation as she heads to the finish line.
Splendid isolation. Indeed, when you've had to buck the wind, buck the cold, and buck a great field for what will be about 16 and a half minutes. And kudos to Brooke Wilson, who really made a very smart move at the appropriate time in this race to get second, or probable second.
Well, 3 times over, Caitlin Toohey was the champion. She ran 16:37.8 in her second of 3 wins back in 2018. And look at the time that Irene Riggs will put on the clock here as well, as the new champion is crowned at NXN, and it is Irene Riggs. And this race now behind for second. Brooke Wilson will get to the line. Mahalik makes a nice surge at the end that Tom had hinted about. Nikki out of the Heartland will finish in 4th. And here comes the sea of humanity, not only for those top 21 positions, for those top performers here at NXN every year. That's Grace Shager, Isabel Conde de Frankenberg. Sophia Kennedy is going to finish in the top 7. Tatum David, Anna Callahan, the Northwest Regional Champion, will make it as well in the top 9. And now we start to watch the team race with, Kinetic, but there was a lot of changes happening in real time at that last split. At 4.4K, Niwat's lead was Niwat was about 20 places behind Kinetic, with Clovis, Lone Peak, and Mount Prospect and Flower Mound all in the mix. But this is where the championship is now won.
And you can see how condensed everybody is, and so much can happen in these last final 100 meters. They have chip timing now, but in the past we used to try to say, even if you can pass some people in the chute, maybe you can get lucky and pick up a few extra points. But yeah, this is where the team score really plays out, and you're going to see everybody battling for those extra places.
Yeah, you see mass finishes here at NXN because the fields are so strong that you didn't see at some of the regionals. I mean, here we got finishers coming across the line every time you look up in multiple packs. That's how good a field this is. By the way, Addie Ritzenheim, 18th place, 9th grader.
So these scores unofficial as they are adjusted in real time. You pull the individual competitors out and then you rescore based on those placings without the individuals. So these numbers will change. So let's all remind ourselves that the great thing about cross country is it's fluid, and credit to the timers doing this work in real time, trying to get us the best and most accurate results as quickly as possible. But Cross Nationals had to wait 3 years to do it. 4 members of their team had a chance to come back to do it, and it will appear now that they will be atop the podium with 81 points.
And we talked about this in the Open, Paul, that Kinetic doesn't have a superstar, but what they do have is a great pack of runners. Well, that was played out today. All 5 of them from 30th to 59th. They packed them in, and that's what won them this meet.
And that's huge. When you're training with the same people day in and day out, and you're able to pack up during a race, there's so much chaos going on, especially when there's all these extra people here that you're not used to running against in a state meet. You really lean on your teammates, and you look at them, and you've been doing all your workouts together, and you get a leader or two in that group, it can really pull the whole team along to a great score.
And a shout out to Niwat, by the way, who was kind of narrowed the gap a little bit, but Ritzenheim started out in 33rd place in this race. Must have gotten some coaching from her dad or a cattle prod, and she got up to 18th place at the finish. And there were a couple of other major moves made by some of their athletes, like Anna Prock, Maddie Schultz, that got them into this podium finish.
You talked about the altitude coming from there and their strength. You know, I'm sure they leaned on that a lot in the later stages and really tried to run the heck out of that second half of this race.
And Buchanan High School in Clovis, a very, very nice performance by them. Looks like they're going to finish third. Grace Hutchison, who we expected to be a top finisher, she ended up 29th, but a nice group behind her.
And they're young, you mentioned. I think 5 of their 7 runners are freshmen and sophomores, so they are going to be a force for the years to come.
You have an incredible memory, you know that? That's really good you remembered that.
I think he's got some cheat notes in front of him. Just I don't want to burst his bubble here, but you know, it's a lot to you know, that's the great thing about our sport. There's so much data and also so many great stories. I mean, these teams have put together phenomenal seasons. You know, you talked about Ritzenheim. She kind of emerged as the top #1 runner for this squad when they needed her the most, and the development that we see out of these kids each and every season. As you think about, crossing the line as you've done in many of your career moments in high school, college, and the pros, this is kind of a reset point for a lot of these kids. How do you use that sort of like end of one chapter to begin planning for the next one?
I mean, as an athlete, you're always looking forward to the next race. And I think for me, I know the second I finished, you look back at all the things you maybe could have done differently. But the most important thing is to always be learning and always be growing. It's important to savor the moment, but at the same time, whether you have a good race or a bad race, you really want to nitpick and look back at everything leading up to it, everything during the race, and grow from it. And that's how you get better as an athlete.
I want to point out, too, on this, looking at the results, Flower Mound finished 6th, the Texas school. And that was a significant performance for them. And the Humphrey sisters really, really came through. Samantha 11th, Nicole 13th, and then Alex Fox, who was 3rd at the state meet, she was 32nd. But here was the problem. Their next runner after that was 115th, and their next runner 190th. So they had a great first 3, but that last 2 really not so good.
Well, Flower Mound, one of those teams that was an at-large bid, so, credit to the committee for advancing them as well as they finish, as Tom mentioned, in 6th place overall. We'll say it one more time for effect. Just also hear my voice once again. Is all results currently unofficial as we await the official results. We'll be going to the course here in a moment. Rich Gonzalez, who's such a big part of putting on this event each and every year, is our roving reporter. He'll have a chance hopefully to talk to some of the top individuals, and as well we'll have the presentation of the team trophies.